Evening. Welcome to quarantine stream number 5, live from Hamburg in northern cold, freezing fucking cold Germany. I hope you are keeping up still and raw with all the weird stuff and the developments and so far. And yeah, it starts to get a little bit annoying to not be able to go outside. Well, we are able to go outside, and but shouldn't really, because it's catching on in Hamburg, this stupid virus. Anyway, let's not dive to that in too deeply, shouldn't we? Yeah. Good evening to everyone in the chat as well. Hey Daniel, John, Pendrek, Stefan, Felix, Abfan, Slave to the Inevitable, Tom, hi, and Clark, and whoever else hasn't written anything. And of course, everybody who's going to watch this later on, hi. Yeah, a little bit of a break from the usual dub techno topic, I guess. Yeah, I had some kind of a grumpy evening and decided to just bang out something really quickly and started. And just like in good old days, the track was done in like 3 hours or something. And yeah, it caused a number of questions. And we are here to find some answers, hopefully. So, Johan, hi. Okan, Semi, hey. Aditya, good evening. Niva, Mark as well. Yeah. So about this project, I hope you are not scared about Bitwig, because it's not Ableton and stuff, but I think most of what I'm going to talk about is related to sound shaping, distortion, limiting, compression, EQing stuff anyway. So how to make a noise in the box, really. Yeah, how about moving on into that? So you are already listening to a third of the track, actually. As you can see, there isn't much. We have like a kick, some hats and stuff, and this weirdo line. And right now you are listening to the non-processed, bare, raw sounds without anything on. So behold, as I continue to enable things, it will gradually get louder, and that is also the case. And my video image is too huge. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah. That shouldn't be the case. All right, so where shall we start? Yeah, probably it makes sense to start with the thing that offers most of the content of this track, being this weird line. And I need to make it louder for myself. That's better. Otherwise, I don't hear any of the details myself. So, what do we have here? And maybe let's make this full screen as well. Hello, Sienna. So, I knew I wanted to make some loud banging stuff and was instantly thinking about FM. And in this case, I have used the lovely chip synth PortaFM for a number of reasons. It's noisy. Like you can hear this. It's not processed right now. There is a lot of noise baked into this already. Lovely aliasing. Let me shut the for a second. It just comes with a lot of noise because it's in fact based on how you would actually build a piece of hardware, if I'm correct. So you have this weird abstraction layer, the interface, and there is actually an emulator inside, and it's treating the thing like its own piece of hardware. And what I like about these things, if you are familiar with MIDI gear, external stuff, back when Stereo Jack and I made music in the studio, we had only the notator, and everything sucked, and MIDI sucked, and sometimes notes were escaping for no particular reason. And that is something I really missed inside the box. So you don't get these happy accidents. And with this one, you get these. And you can also hear this every now and then. There are some weird notes out of nowhere. This fart thing. So maybe it makes sense to look at the sequence for a second, because it's a little bit quirky. And so right now it's a polyphonic thing, and what I like doing is, when I want these kind of quirky things, to restrict the polyphony to like 2 voices in this case, but keep throwing too many notes for it to handle. Like, for example, here we have almost 3 notes. This is probably going to be one of those hiccups like this as well. So we're timing. I give you a chance to listen to that for a moment. And I really like what this is doing. This, to me, is already techno at its best. It's the most stupid sound you can probably use from an FM synth, but it's quirky as and I like that. So yeah, what do we have? It's also that simple to use. Strange. And there you can hear some of the noise it's emitting already, because it's correctly emulated. I think 9, 11, 12-bit OPL mess, quantized envelopes. And this is what I don't get from any other FM synth so far. And that's why I've chosen this one in this case. Obviously, the sound isn't really there yet, especially in conjunction with kick. It's just boring, even though it's a little bit quirky. And it's getting louder now. So there you go. And I hope the levels are still okay. So what do we have here? And I'm usually not a friend of making effect chains that are this big. However, all these things exist in this chain for a particular reason. And yeah, but first, quick chat check. Slave to the inevitable. Yeah, it reminds me of Tolkachev as well. Niva can't really hear the Bitwig audio. My idea was to not enable stuff in stages, so it will get louder, so you can actually hear the difference. But if it's not loud enough right now, I can change that as well. Maybe you can give me a hint. Hey JCO, by the way. Yes, it emulates cheap Yamaha Porta Sound keyboards alongside other things. And if you want to, you can talk to David about that. Hi David, by the way. So, if it's loud enough, let's continue. Oops. So, what do we have here? And maybe I should do this because I'm going to disable a few things. Turning down the voice. That should be good. Yeah, I need to disable the effects again to get to grips with it, what it's doing. So, what do we have here? And I'd like to convey that I don't start with too much brain. It starts with throwing in random things and cleaning up the mess later. So I did a little bit of the cleaning already. Not that you get totally off track, that this has to do with science or something. So anyway, first things first. And I should start with the obvious note velocity layer trick, which if you have seen my videos, you know already. It just adds this little bit of variation here and there. So it's always nice to have, and in this case it's really just a little bit to unstiffen the sequence. First thing this is going into is some kind of multi-band transient design thing, which is only rec in Bitwig, and it's not doing that much, except, and I added this later during processing, I found that without this, the mid-range would get a little bit lost against the bass processing. So maybe you can hear that before. It adds or pronounces the higher notes in the area between 176 and 1.2 kilohertz. I felt they would get lost otherwise. So that's something I added later during the process. What I really started with was trash. I mean, you know it. It's just a very capable way of destroying anything, and whatever I find very tricky, it easily gets completely out of hand. And what I did is just firing up a few presets, like doing the stepping through the list and looking for something that sounds good. But as you can hear, this would be way too much. So I dialed it down a bit, and I already knew that later I don't want to have these utterly distorted subs So what I do when I use trash very often and distort these complex lines, I filter out the low end. Where is it? Like that. So, and just to give you an idea, if I didn't do that, not sure if it translates. If you have headphones, you should notice it's simply too much. It completely sucks the air and energy out of any form of dynamics processing. So that's why I tend to, if I distort stuff, keep it out of the sub range to just get some kind of control. Next thing is another layer of saturation and really harsh. It's Joachim's lovely Enceladus EQ. And let's disable that for a second. Obviously, just boosting. It's the only trick this one does is boosting stuff into oblivion and also adding saturation to these close bands. And I really like that you have the option to say I want this 2 octaves wide or 1 or whatever, and in which frequency area. It comes with a few strange emulation modes, and I really like the fast compression setting because it gives the specific area this crunch. While not completely overdoing it. Let me check the chat. Any questions? JCO, yes, I'm on it. Okay, no questions so far. That's good. So, Joachim's thingy, love it. It's free, by the way. And then Valhalla Delay. This is, and I need to check because why do I have 2 delays for no particular reason? No, of course. This one is actually a delay. Let me disable this, which gets opened later in the track. So a little bit of automation, nothing fancy. And this instance is simply driving it some more because it's a really good plugin to crank shit up, and it also adds a little bit of delay to the audio, which sometimes can be annoying, but in this case it's not. So also drastic impact. It adds so much character and it has all these lovely modes, so it's one of my favorite distortions right now. Yeah, I think this tool is simply there because there is no outgain control for this one, and I really like to keep my levels within a range that makes sense. As you can see, I'm not really loud. Why am I not really loud? Because I found the area between 0 and 12 to be really important. I can easily spot any escaping transients or clipping issues while fiddling around with plugins. If this was sitting here, same in Ableton, too much gain, I don't see any things escaping. And also working with emulations, you don't want to feed them way too much gain, right? So next thing is the first EQ, and interestingly so late. It's another free one, and it's one I'm using to do some more broad strokes. It's not really clinic or super precise, but I like the tone and simple, straightforward. And what I also like is that it goes down to 15 hertz, 10 hertz. You can cut the low range down to 10. And this is really interesting. I'm not sure if we are able to see that right now because it's out of that, and it probably won't show up much in span either. But let's try something. Maybe there is a way, because, and that's what I do very, very often when dealing with very bass heavy material. I dislike too harsh cuts because I often feel they suck up too much of the energy, and knowing this is probably, I don't know, what is it, 12 dB per octave, so a 2-pole probably. I like what's happening in between the area between 10 and 20 sometimes, and I really have to crank this up. Do not get into talking shit. Whoops, wrong one. But if you have headphones, it's not doing much of a difference. Maybe it's just in my head. Anyway, sometimes it has an impact, and especially in alignment with the kick, maybe it makes more sense to check that one out again when the kick is fully playing. JCO says 10 Hz with low Q, 1 or 2 pole, that's basically DC block and not much more. Yes, it is. And at the same time, you know these curves. And if you have a lot of bass material, and we do have a lot of bass right now, especially in that range, if you put this to 30, it starts removing too much energy. I mean, I'm sweeping between 35 now and concentrate, focus on this area, and you see how fast you get a lot of change. And that's why maybe I also just like it because it's special or unique, or I can talk random crap about it on YouTube. I don't know. So JCO, it can make a difference for successive processing, yes, and I have a lot of stuff going on here on the master as well, and the summing and crap. So I'm sure it had a bigger impact, and we will check that again when everything is enabled. Stairjack says, don't you waste data depth by keeping the levels low? Yes, I do a little bit, but it will get much louder soon when I press that button, which I don't want to do right now because this adds a lot of color as well, and right now I want to focus on this area. So oddly enough, now I know why I haven't heard anything. It's another EQ. This one is my standard go-to thing for like, I don't know, 15 years right now. I just know it inside out. I wouldn't say it's particularly great. It just does the job. I know what it does, and thus it's a tool. Why haven't we heard and seen anything? Because it has an elliptic filter setting, which is simply removing anything under 10 Hertz. So this was obviously nonsense. We have cleared that. Good to know. Up to this point, the processing creates a number of strange peaks, which I do not want to have in my compressor. So there you go. No, don't want to have that. And one last EQ. Never have too many EQs, right? Why I like the Passeq EQ, the massive passive thing, is because it's mid-side processing features. The way it grabs frequency ranges, and what I'm using it for here is just rolling off the low end around. No, do I do that? Yes, just a little bit, and boosting the mid stuff a lot, as well as the sides to open the stereo image a little bit more. Because I found it to be lacking presence here, and the Passeq is really good at doing these nice broad strokes without anything shitty going on. Yeah, last not least, Novatron getting way too much input right now. Let me disable that. I just love the glue of this thing. And no science about that. I just tweaked around. I potentially might change the gain structure again here to not run into these many peaks, and for now that was just fine to me. Last not least, I'm going into this virtual summing thing because it also adds a little bit of noise and glues them mixed together in the end. And did I drive it? No, not this channel. So that's this track. Boring. Cool. So, and hello Martin Blasco, welcome. Yes, you made it. So, kick. Let's engage. maybe it makes sense to solo this one for a second. Yes, I think that's in solo it's not even a cool kick. It just works very well with this bass. And what do we have here? So quick question, where did this track come from? I made it yesterday. So we have a little bit of plate-driven rumble, nothing too fancy about that. If you want a rumble bass drum, just use a plate reverb and cut everything away that isn't bass. Even does a little bit of stereo. It's no magic. I witness a lot of people who want to layer kicks for hours and make their life really much more complicated than these things actually are. Plate, reverb, or whatever reverb, just smack it down there. Which is creating a little bit of a problem. That's why I'm using this one. Right now, you hear the low end is opening, and I think it's ranging almost, it's overlapping with the attack of the next note, and I want to prevent that to make my compressor life much easier. And it has a big impact, as you can hear. JCO asks, can you play the bass kick sample solo for a sec? Yes, I did that. Oops, sorry. 909. This is like the base of dance music. The foundation of techno is just 909 bass drums. And in my opinion, it doesn't need much more than that. Any record you bought up to, I don't know, probably 2005 or 10, and had a huge big kick. It was 90% sure 909 with tons of distortion and compression and EQing. So let's keep shit simple, damn it. And this one is really interesting, especially in post-processing. So I'm using this one a lot these days. It's basically an envelope, a volume envelope with proper non-linear curves that you can throw in. It gets its trigger from MIDI. It's like a fake VCA that you would potentially use in a Euro rack. And what I really like is how the attack and release response, especially in conjunction with lots of processing. That's where it shines. Behold. No way, wrong way. It's just the envelope that changes the impact of the attack so much. It's a great little tool to have. And then distortion. That is the thing that turns 909s into good kicks. That's my go-to distortion for bass drums, really, because it adds a ton of fuzz and has all these nice shaping options, and the noise reducer is very handy as well. It doesn't do much here. If you have a noisy sample, for example, well, it does something. Let's enable this again and listen. Kind of removes from the bottom what the envelope didn't remove. And then you have all kinds of options for distorting. Right now I'm probably destroying the sound too much. Anyway, great thing, also free, Windows only, sorry. At this point, oof. I wasn't sure why I put it in here, but that's the beauty of things. I just create a mess on the go and decide, oh, it's still out there, let's throw in another tool and let's not care about this one anymore. Anyway, the tool just pulls down the amplitude again, and one of these instances was as well. And I'm removing this area and stripping away something of that. And also the low end again. Then obviously, and it's bleeding red, much more saturation. I see something is getting asked. Apparently it's just a wave shaper. You mean this one? Yeah, it's probably just a wave shaper, like so many things, but I just like it. Yeah, back to things. EQ number one. Let's take this as timbre shaping thing to control the color. This one adds a little bit more punch, especially to the higher transients. This is simply removing the high end. We don't need that, so goodbye. And then compression again. And obviously also another layer of saturation. And this channel as well is going into Waves Nonlinear Summer. And it really, so how I'm tweaking this, by the way, I do not tweak EQs in solo. That's a really important thing. It cost me hours of my life already to tweak a bass drum in solo, thinking, oh, this is a great bass drum, and put things into context, and it doesn't work anymore. Don't do that. Learn from my mistake. What you can do and what makes sense to me is finding the frequency. So the point to tweak, for example, on an EQ. But when it comes to amplitude, that's where I put it in context and see how much of a cut or a boost I need. Otherwise, it's just a road to nowhere. Tweaking a dead end. Don't always tweak in context. Or keep in mind, solo where, context how much. That is a very good idea. JCO, the Novatron, is it based on any classic hardware comp? I don't think one. It lends from many devices, but if you have heard a little bit of the UBK Happy Fun Time Hour and heard Gregory Scott talk about it, it's like his compressor, the one he needs. And what I like about it is you have these attack and release settings going from short via FET, VCA curve, to variable mu and everything in between. Where did I set that? Wouldn't know. Somewhere around there, maybe. So a stereo jack. How's the melody diced? What do you mean? The sequence? So please recheck. I don't want to bore the other folks with the details again. It will be at the very start of this video where I dissect that. But it's this motherfucker. So, and then because we are in a loop, let's disable that. Oh wait, so the 909, there isn't too much fancy stuff worth mentioning. Again, an instance of this one, this time as delay and drive. The devil lock is really interesting. It completely crushes the signal to death, and that's causing a bit of an issue that I still have to fix, which you can hear. Check out the heads and here comes an additional snare, and it's going to be a problem because of this. It's just untamable. And then again, nice grid. So requires a little bit more work. Yeah, another level control. This time compression from the API fashion SSL comp, and also going into this one. So master. This is just the analytics. Let's remove that for a second. Summing. It's a little bit drive, and maybe we should check the gain right now. Can you see it? So what's happening over here? Just little bit of additional drive and fuzz, and it somehow, yeah, it does this summing magic. Another Novatron, and now we're getting louder. I just, as you can see, I like it very much because I'm using it everywhere. Is this still within the boundaries of what the stream can handle? Can you still hear me? Then I would have to remove this. Oh, so this is one. It's a tape emulation, and it's probably, at least to me on headphones, that is way too much. And this isn't doing much, and yet it's creating a lot of additional gain and drive. And I don't know, it's I wouldn't say it's a great tape emulation. It's actually a pretty old plugin, and at the same time it does some weird things, especially the way it's touching bass and phase is strange. And yeah, Daniel is right, it has a very special flavor, and dry and wet probably wouldn't work because it's rotating the phase somehow, so you would create even more issues. And it's a magic box of flavor. The differences are rather subtle. Let's use a better loop. It's really aggressive. I think I use it like that. And it just smells. So if you really want to turn something into crap, this is also a great option. And I wouldn't use it with extreme settings. That's where it doesn't seem to perform that well. And well, in the end, and how loud are we right now? And I think for the sake of the stream, I removed like 3 dB in total from this processing chain to not completely overdo the loudness on the stream. It's probably... Is it too loud, by the way? And there was an interesting question on the Discord earlier about limiting and how I use limiters. And obviously that's one of those questions where I cannot possibly give a general kind of advice. What I do or how do I decide? Maybe I can give you an idea. So let's just give me and I haven't done it much with this track, or I haven't used this because I do not have to think about it right now anymore. But how do you decide to use a limiter? Usually when I have this open on a track on the master and I get these clicks, then I start looking around for the source. That is the kind of stuff I do not want to have in my track, because it's always going to create some kind of problem. A little word of advice, there's also some kind of a display error, and this is really too loud. There is some strange phenomenon due to aliasing and whatever. Probably JCO, you can tell us much more about that. That sometimes these kind of analyzers show peaks where are none. However, in this case, I would believe there are plenty. By the way, that was another cool must-have of mine. Some guy called Ben Schulz. Good tool. So, when to use limiting? I mean, this track, this sound in itself, because it's so noisy and weird and off and lovely, it looks good here, but you can hear the overtones on the attack already, and if you start boosting that a lot, you get peaks, lots of peaks. And right now, here they are. It's just the nature of things, and that isn't specifically a digital problem. You would probably also get that with a DX7 or some of these lousy Yamaha OPL chip FM synths, if they were capable of creating this kind of sound. So and very often right now, for my usual settings, this is already very, very heavy. I try to not get much into problematic areas, because I made this track in a hassle and just created a mess and was grumpy as fuck. I didn't give much of a fuck, so but generally speaking, let's check the kick. Is there a limiter here? No. Why? Because I think the sample doesn't have one of these super nasty peaks. It's already pre-saturated. If I would use a really raw 909 bass drum that's unprocessed, you have these huge peaks coming from the noise circuit or pulse that's triggering the VCOs, which gives this nice click, but it's just way too much. And very before I start processing that, first step very often is limiter and just remove like 2 dB of that. Otherwise, with compression in the end, it will always hyperactively react to these peaks, and that's not what I want. If I want punch, keep the transients in check, really. And I wish I could convey a general formula how to use limiters or dynamics processors in general and use them mindfully. When you have the impression there is some weird stuff going on in your signal, strange peaks, try check if a limiter gets rid of a little bit of these issues, if those are clicks. If you can also use a clipper, of course, like this weird strange diode clipper by this Chaudhuri guy, Stefan. Yes. Chat check. So, Kirkwood, Jeffrey, Zero Fucks, great results. Yeah, but actually not giving too much of a fuck creates interesting results very quickly. JCO asks, what limiter? In those extreme cases it will do some sort of coloring? As you can see, I'm using the standard limiter that comes with bitweight. And like I said, even when I'm making such a messy track, I stay the fuck about 10 dB away at least from 0. So I do not need much extreme limiting. I do not want to get close to extreme limiting. That's why I don't use many different limiters, I guess. And yes, you're right, the diode clipper is another moniker for a particular type of wave shaping curve, and probably also a case of limiting, but it has a flavor and a sound to it. It's like these diode overdrives you have on the gain knob on your old mixing desk, where you make something flash red. That's very often a diode clipper, I think. Have I tried other limiters just for comparison? It might make a difference. Because I don't go for super loud, I do not intend to win a loudness war. I want my music as crunchy as possible, and you totally should go for that too, other than loud. I mean, with the function ones out there, they really like nice subs that are still, that resemble some kind of waveform and not just on, off. That's why I don't use that many limiters, or try to stay away from that. And to me, this is -8 right now, but you can see it's just these very, very tiny peaks. So yeah, to me that's fine enough. It's not a critical processing thing for me. On the master, it's a different story. That's where I have the this version of the, was it the Mollot on limiter number 6 by Vlad. Probably you all have it or know it, and if not, go for it because it's cool. I got this one because you can change the order of the modules, and sometimes for me that's necessary. But even here, I'm not interested in driving it to death. It's enough for me to make these just a little bit, just up to this point. I want to have treated my signals in a way that they do not go fully berserk. And if you listen to this, yes, it's rough, but it's also crunchy and still punchy. Yes, it probably needs another 3 or 4 hours of fine-tuning and tweaking, but I don't know. I want to create dynamic music, even though is it still dynamic at all? Yeah. 7 dB RMS. No, 10 minus 11. Just quickly checking. I would probably try to get it up to -8 at max, and that's enough. Yeah, Jesse, oh, you don't mind about loud, I know that. But still, even your IDM tracks, they are super loud, but also very tamed and controlled. And it's not just stupid limiting. Well, let's have a chat about that sometime. Maybe you can enlighten me. And I don't know, limiters to me, I like... Just get rid of a little bit of peaks and that's it. So... when it comes to ranging, maybe someone asked which DAW is it? It's Bitwig. And why I started this track in Bitwig is because I know, and I've been there already in my episode 2 streams ago or 3. It's this intersection between these two worlds. When I'm recording something live and I just route it or assigned a few of the knobs and parameters to my MIDI controller. When I'm recording something, when I'm jamming, I need to see the time axis, the context. Where am I? And is everything recording correctly? Because ever so often, or sometimes I start recording, and if I start recording in Ableton and I forgot a button and you're done and made a good jam and forgot to record the automation, no, that's, to me, it's just assuring to know I twist a button, it's doing something, alright, go. So, and there were some variations of the pattern as well, and I mean, it's 3 tracks and just variations of the sequence. For this one, for example, I simply I removed the bass and then it changes context and then it simply goes back again. And same here. Cool bass. And sometimes I hear the transient from the kick is missing. Yeah, it's one of those things I probably want to fix. I would guess it has to do with fine-tuning the low end to prevent probably this one from stepping on its own tail. Martin asks, how much do you care about master effects? I mean, in terms of glue, overall flavor, do you put them on up front and mix into them as you make a track? It depends. Again, yes, in this case, I knew I wanted to have some kind of glue and aggressive style, and I threw in the Novatron and magnetic as well very early, but when I started fine-tuning, aligning the kick and the bass, I disabled anything I have on my master because it blurs vision. It's a cloud I want to have out of my way when I'm fixing issues and I need to make some bass judgments. These don't really help. And as you can see, I'm trying to not overdo that. So for glue and flavor, yes, they are sitting there and I mix into them, but I know that when I'm drastically, if I would change the bass drum, for example, I would have to probably readjust the timing of the compressor or the ratio or the threshold, depending on the gain structure of the kick itself. If it has much more of an attack transient, it would probably trigger the compressor more. So for me, I mix into those, but I know when I have to attend them, and that is when changing bass drums or using different sounds or creating another bass layer or anything that potentially has a huge impact on dynamics, or when working on details, I disable them first and then enable them and see if they need any kind of adjustment. I hope that answers your question. And yes, Sarah Jack says limiting is often essential for kicks. Yeah, that's when I mostly use a limiter, but no particular one, just whatever the DAW has to offer. Maybe I'm being super ignorant and there are extremely crazy fancy ways, but I'm not using limiters for distortion. Am I? Yes, very often I'm using compression for distortion, and that's probably very close to limiting. A lot of people say it's the same. I have the impression it's not. Yeah, I mean, this also is a kind of limiting, isn't it? Let's look at what it does. How cute. And there we have these clicks again. Let's try something really quick and see which difference it makes. That's why I'm not sure if this click is really in there. Probably is. But I feel like I want to get rid of this portion and I can't. I'm sacrificing way too much of the pitch envelope. And that's why I wouldn't want to use a limiter in this case, probably, but maybe let's try that. Let's give it a try. Christ. That's way too much. Yeah, how about crap. That adds quite some subs. Nice. Does it? I can hear something. This is not a good form of display. However, yeah, same problem. There you go. Creates another issue, but is it really critical in this case? That's the question. And that creates a problem. So, yeah, limiting. I'm probably just ignorant. Kirkwood asks, what is that diode machine? It's a diode clippers, part of an experiment. I also posted these on the Discord. They are free and developed by some student of electronics, I think, who has also published some papers about non-linear and broken circuitry and has developed some fantastically strange things that sound or can sound really odd and pleasing and strange. By the way, I'm not sure if I made this clear enough. Rumble kicks. If you want really huge rumble kicks, that's all there is to rumble. And if you want to overdo it, do it like that. So let me give this a little bit more ease again. Stefan asks, do you ever use the high-pass filters on the compressor? Do you mean the high-pass on the sidechain? Yes, of course. Big time. That's way too much right now. Something changed. Yes, super important. Right now I'm feeding all the low end into the compressor, and you can hear how it affects the high end and the mid-range. Easiest way to open that is using the sidechain filter and dial in some ease and remove it from the burden of dealing with all these low-end frequencies. And I'm doing the same. That was the master, same thing here. It's probably going to suck out the energy of the signal. Let's see. drive is much more radical and drastic. That's why. How would you go about creating drama in this track? Can you define drama? Just variation? I automated some of the settings in this one. Like that. Doesn't always have to be a riser, JCO. Serdek, Ronnie, do you use send return effects or just in channel effects? Depends. In this case, it's just crept into the channel because I wanted to make my life a little bit easier. If I would have used a return and put the delay there, then I would have to insert another compressor and feed it with the sidechain from the baseline. And then I would also use the flavor from the further processing, the EQing, a little bit of the limiting, and no, in this case, just simple. Keep shit simple. In this case, with dub techno, it's a very different story. But this is also not too critical of a delay. It doesn't go too low, and I really like the breathing in between. And I think I wouldn't achieve exactly the same result if I used it on a return with its own compressor and settings, and that would probably also be another segue into starting editing too much, even though maybe individually distorting that could be interesting. So, hello Danilo, good evening. Yeah. And what I really have to do is work around the devil lock somehow. It works really well on pre-compressed material, maybe that would be an option. But I don't like the way the snare is sucking up the live out of the head. And I didn't notice it yesterday evening when I was recording the track because I was just banging to it. Phantom movement, do you also use parallel compression? Yes, and I am not sure. Yes, right now this is parallel. Dry, wet. And it's also not set up correctly. In perfect case, we should compensate the gain. -8. So yes, parallel. Hello Weichkäse, es ist schon fast vorbei. Why not separate the snare out to a separate track? Because I want some kind of munchiness. I want a little bit of noodle soup from the 909 there. It's just not controllable. Check this out. Wait. And I would guess it's not controllable for a reason, which is please buy the full version of the Big Brother. Just for reference, is this the correct one? So. By the way, for some reason, an FX layer in Bitwig creates a separate track, which I just noticed shortly before the stream. So, no devil lock, no devil lock at 0. It's also crunchy, and as soon as you start, that's why it gets really radical. Yeah. I'm glad to see Bitwig videos, says Danilo. Looking forward to you sorry, cable. I'm looking forward to check how you would set up a live set in Bitwig next time. Well, I don't play live. You can probably wait for a while. Yet. So, welcome back, John. Stefan says, the big further of Devil-Lock has slow and fast release times. Yes, I probably want to get that sometime. And Gaspar was asking, is kick velocity always on 100? I'm sure it is at a stable setting somewhere, and it's not 100, but it's just a sample, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference in this case. Danilo, but if you have any questions, you can at least ask them, or we can think about that. But I'm sure there are many people who have much more experience when it comes to preparing live sets. Because, well, last time I played live, I was using Bus Tracker and it crashed. And I learned don't use Bus Tracker for live sets. At least not in the way I used it. And that was just a huge noodle. So anyway. Did I forget anything? I would like to stress how important it is, again, to take some time programming patterns. I cannot get sick of telling people how important it is to create or in a different way. When I'm looking at a pattern and I don't have any idea anymore how it's going to sound at the end, it's at least interesting. Different note lengths, especially when you have a synth with restricted polyphony, some interesting things can happen. It's probably going to get totally crazy. Is there a portamento? where is the portamento again? Ah, yeah. And also glide is always good. Jeffrey, bus tracker for a live set? No, you don't need two PCs. Semi asks, Ronnie, you said two voices on chip synth in the beginning. However, you have 3 note chords following the same pattern, not all the time. So how does the polysynth work? And does the randomization picking 2 voices? Yes, your question makes sense, and the way I understand it, very often, or most synths and plugins at least, have very strict settings for that, where you can say or assign a priority to say like highest note, lowest note, last note, first note, stuff like that. In this case, it's a little bit of a happy accident. Wait. Right now it's very stable. Did that answer your question? Slate to the inevitable. It's amazing how that one pattern carries the whole track. I thought there were a lot of different sounds when I listened to the track yesterday. Yeah, very often it's just a matter of using what you have. And in this case, I really have to be honest, it's a happy coincidence that I just started programming the sequence, the bass notes, to work well sitting under the kick, and the other ones doing their thing above. But that's the beauty especially of FM and portamento type sounds and voice restrictions, and you can do the same in operator, same but different. FM synths are really great at doing messy things with incoming notes and voice restrictions, especially when glide or portamento is involved. Then you can create sequences that can actually occupy the entire thing. So keeping that in mind, FM is my go-to stuff for tracks like this. And I mean, the sound isn't even interesting. Let's be honest. Let's disable the stereo delay. It's nice. But make it techno by distorting the hell out of it. Also try. There are like a shit ton of free little Stompbox plugins. I'm working on a list of plugins that I deem useful for that. and they are really fun. Use distortion, lots of distortion. George, what is that synth? Sounds metal plucky. It's still this FM. Ah, there we had one of those escaping notes. I do not get paid to make this shouldn't be an advert for that. I just happen to like it very much. So and yeah. Any further questions? Did I say everything I wanted to say? We dissected the kick. 909. Phantom Movement asks, when you sequence the pattern, do you have a scale mode in mind? Any particular intervals you tend to use? When I make tracks like that, it has to be wrong. There is no scale. The mindset is not giving a fuck. With dub techno it's different, but then it's also whatever sounds good and fits the mood. But with stuff like this, I want things to be weird. And I think, sorry, this doesn't represent any meaningful scale at all. It's the Carl O'Connor scale. JCO, when you arrange a label who wants to release it, then I will tell you when you can buy it and where. Stefan, is the oscilloscope that much better than the built-in Bitwig one? It's bigger. I can resize it. Can you resize it? Not sure if. This is probably fantastic. It's just too small for me. Bitwig guys, can you make this full screen, please? You want a digital vinyl rip? Yeah. EMP released rip with vintage vinyl rippery by Magix. Stereo Jack, I will send you the files later. Hey Craig. Oh, that sounds shitty. JCO, I doubt that I would be a good fit for Drumcode unless this would be the 90s. Martin, I'm not sure if you've seen any of my former streams where I talk about dub techno. That is a lot about making things right or in a very specific way. But I think that this kind of techno has to be attended with how can I fuck this shit up in the worst possible way? How did I never fucked up a sound like this before? Or how can I make this wrong or weird or... And then go fix it later. But this is often the sentiment during the last years that people say techno is not that adventurous anymore and everything is like either rumble stuff or and tracks don't have bass lines anymore. Yeah, don't cater to the gallery and find ways of making shit wrong or not giving a fuck. This is, if you know, the entire Schleudertrauma thing back in the day was born from a state of let's not give a fuck. And I happen to think that very often the best tracks come out of this kind of particular mindset. Dollar. So, wait. Craig, can you tell me how the Bitwig analyzer goes to full screen, please? It's definitely not double-clicking. Sorry, Bitwig. I'm just dumb. Not that this is clearly a window icon. Yeah, okay. Cool. Now, can I have this in 60 FPS, please? I think I still prefer this one. And not even that has stable 30 frames per second. But hey, Craig, thank you very much. And yeah, I haven't used it. I think I'm using about 1.2% of everything Bitwig has to offer. As usual, it's enough. Martin says, I mean, I try to make techno, but kinda started by learning scales and modes. Just make my catwalk across keyboard and that does the job. And yes, I'm probably forgetting about stuff again. If you look at this pattern, I started with a simple one bar thing and then duplicated that to more bars and made it more interesting by entering a note here and there and removing a note here and there to not make it overly repetitive, so it's not like I cuffed into the keyboard and then it was done. There is, I think, some kind of logic to how I attend this, and it kind of works out for me by following some first principles of making interesting patterns, and that is, don't make every note the same length, don't make every note the same velocity, stuff like that. And also knowing I'm going to put this synth in 2 voices, but sometimes play 3 at once and see what's happening. That creates these strange things as well, but yeah, it's so easy to say. And I wish I started with scales and notes. I still can't remember. If you watch any of my other videos, you will... I should die in shame over playing the oh, I'm looking for interesting chord notes. I can also not play the keyboard. I suck at doing that, and I wish I would have learned that, and I think I say that in about everything. It's just nothing I give that much of priority, so I don't learn it. Then my longing can't be that bad, right? Travis, we have, I found out how to full screen, or at least make it bigger, and yes, it also works in full screen. So do we have anything else for today's stream? Oh no, Martin, you don't have to be sorry. I didn't understand you in any bad way. Totally not. I really wish I would be able to memorize scales, and I can sit down and I do find chords on the keyboard, and I can also play them musically enough for my needs to make a track about it. If it wasn't so inconvenient to sit in front of the camera and play stuff here, I would maybe also do that on screen, but I don't. Point is, I think my process of programming notes is, at least on stream, is rather shameful to watch, and I know I'm not alone with that. There are people like Kirk DiGiorgio also saying, I have no idea about that. I just make techno. So goodbye, JCO. Do that. Drum code 10, Kari Lekebusch, please. John's secret technique, enjoy. If you don't have any pressing questions or are interested in anything that is related and fits into this, I would call it a day, and would like to remind you, I'm super happy if you share this with your circles, or join me on Patreon, or on Twitter, or wherever. I'd like to keep this going, and gathering a little bit of following does really help. It changes my energy about this, and especially seeing people who buy me a coffee on Patreon means a terrible lot to me. That is quite something, and I'm very grateful for everybody out there doing that. My Patreons, thank you very much. Or join the Discord, so where we talk about this shit all day, or other philosophical topics. Yeah. Stereo Jack, I will record that. I ask you a question. Do you want the bass line with or without effects? Do you want this? Or that? Sorry. So, but let's chat about that on the phone. Other than that, I hope you stay sane and be selective enough about the news you choose to read and the information you want to have in your head right now. And I hope your families are doing fine as well. I think we will get through this and have learned a lot in the end. At least I hope so. So, with that said, have a very good evening. Good night, over, out. Oh, by the way, last thing, I noticed that streaming every 2 days was a little bit ambitious, and I will switch to every 3 days right now. Okay, so next stream should be... Yeah, Saturday is probably a bad idea. Yeah, just keep it up. Do subscribe and you won't miss the announcement. I will announce it at least in the morning, and I'm open for suggestions as well. If you're still watching this after the recorded version and find a question, of course, ask. Asking doesn't cost any money. So, with that said, cheers everyone. This was good fun, and I can still listen to this without getting too annoyed. That is a very good sign. So, good night.